The acrid taste of bile, sharp and sudden, flooded Alex's mouth as he rounded the corner onto the community green. It wasn't the idyllic scene of children playing tag or neighbors exchanging pleasantries that usually greeted him. Instead, a tableau of such calculated cruelty was unfolding that for a horrifying suspended moment, his brain refused to process the input from his eyes. A ring of children, some frozen in discomfort, others with the dawning cruel curiosity of youth, encircled a central figure of unimaginable degradation. His daughter, Maya. She was on her knees in the damp grass, her small 10-year-old frame trembling like a leaf in a storm. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, her breath coming in ragged, hitched gasps that spoke of a terror too profound for screams. Before her, inches from her face, lay a crumpled, brightly colored candy wrapper, a garish stain on the otherwise pristine green. And looming over her, a vulture in a pastel pantsuit, was Ms. Henrietta Finch, president of the Pleasant Valley Homeowners Association. Ms. Finch's voice, a high-pitched, venomous drone, sliced through the unnaturally still afternoon air. "I said pick it up." Finch's finger, adorned with a large, ostentatious ring, jabbed aggressively towards the wrapper, then towards Maya's mouth. "If your hands are too useless, too crippled to perform such a simple task, then you will use your teeth. This community, young lady, has standards. We will not tolerate your filth, your disgusting incompetence. Pick it up now." Alex felt the world tilt a nauseating lurch as the blood roared in his ears. Maya, his sweet, gentle Maya, whose juvenile rheumatoid arthritis made every movement of her small hands an agony, whose fingers were often swollen and twisted, making the simplest tasks a monumental effort. Forcing her to pick up anything with her hands would have been cruel enough. But this was a public crucifixion of her spirit, a deliberate sadistic act of humiliation designed to break her. He saw Maya's head begin to droop, her tear-filled eyes fixated on the wrapper, her lower lip trembling, as she contemplated the unthinkable. "Maya, no." The sound ripped from Alex's throat, raw and ragged, fueled by a surge of adrenaline so potent it left him momentarily breathless. He was moving his legs, covering the distance in a blur, the carefully constructed composure he wore for his job, for the world shattering into a million incandescent pieces. The other children, the few adult onlookers who had been watching with a mixture of discomfort and morbid fascination, scattered like startled pigeons as he thundered onto the green. He fell to his knees beside Maya, his arms enfolding her, pulling her small, trembling body against his own, shielding her from Finch, from the prying eyes, from the unspeakable degradation she was being forced to endure. "Don't you touch it, baby girl." He choked out his voice, thick with a grief and rage so profound it felt like it would tear him apart. "Don't you dare. Daddy's here. Daddy's here." He could feel her heart hammering against his chest, the frantic, terrified rhythm of a trapped bird. Over Maya's shoulder, his eyes now burning with an icy, lethal fury, met Ms. Finch's. The woman actually had the gall to look affronted. Her lips pursed her expression, one of righteous indignation. "Mr. Tanner," she began, her voice regaining its imperious, grating tone. "I will thank you not to interfere. I am simply instructing your daughter in her civic responsibilities. She dropped that wrapper, and she will—" "That is a lie." Ms. Finch Alex's voice was preternaturally calm, a low, dangerous thrum that vibrated with the effort of his control. He knew Maya. Meticulously neat, almost to a fault, she would never carelessly discard litter. This was a setup, a deliberate, cruel performance orchestrated by this monster. And even if it were true, what you are doing, what you are attempting to force my disabled child to do, is monstrous. It is inhuman. Disabled Finch's laugh was a brittle, ugly sound. "Oh, please. She's clumsy, Mr. Tanner. Lazy. And she needs to learn that there are consequences for her slovenliness. If her hands don't work properly, as you so often claim, then she must find other means. Teeth, for instance, seem perfectly adequate for the task." She punctuated the statement with a smug, self-satisfied smirk. The casual barbarity of her words, the blatant, unadulterated ableism, the sheer, unadulterated evil of it, settled into Alex's soul like a shard of frozen glass. This wasn't just an overzealous HOA president. This wasn't just a power trip. This was hate, pure, undiluted, and directed with surgical precision at the most vulnerable part of his world. The father in him wanted to scream to unleash the torrent of violence that was coiling in his gut. But another part of him, a colder, more calculating part, was already at work. Investigator Alex Tanner, Oak Haven Police Department Hate Crimes Unit, was on the scene. And Henrietta Finch had just committed a textbook example of a bias-motivated crime. She had, in her arrogance and her cruelty, handed him everything he needed to destroy her. Their life in Pleasant Valley Estates had been an attempt to find peace, a sanctuary for Maya, after the storms of her early childhood. Alex's wife, Clara, a vibrant, loving woman, had succumbed to an aggressive form of cancer 2 years before leaving Alex to navigate the treacherous waters of single parenthood, while simultaneously caring for a child with complex medical and emotional needs. Maya's juvenile idiopathic arthritis had been diagnosed when she was just 3, a cruel thief that had stolen much of the easy, unthinking joy of childhood, replacing it with a relentless regimen of medication, physical therapy, and chronic pain. Her hands and wrists were particularly affected, the joints often swollen and tender, her fine motor skills severely compromised. Writing, drawing, even feeding herself could be a challenge on bad days. Yet through it all, Maya possessed a quiet resilience, a gentle spirit, and an intellect that shone brightly, her love for books and stories, a constant source of solace and escape. Alex worked for the Oak Haven Police Department in a role he usually just described as specialized casework or community relations. He rarely spoke about the specifics, the grim realities of investigating hate crimes, the swastikas spray-painted on synagogues, the brutal beatings of gay men, the terrorizing of immigrant families, the insidious, soul-crushing abuse directed at individuals with disabilities. He'd seen the absolute worst of humanity, the depths to which prejudice and intolerance could drag a person. His work was a heavy burden, but it was also a sacred duty, a commitment to fighting for those who were targeted simply for being who they were. He tried to leave the darkness of his job at the precinct door to create a home for Maya that was filled with light love and unwavering support. Pleasant Valley, with its tree-lined streets, its promises of good schools and safe parks, had seemed like the perfect refuge. He'd bought a small single-story bungalow, easily adaptable for Maya's needs, with a sunny patch in the backyard where he hoped to build her an accessible garden. For the first year, it had been relatively peaceful. Maya had slowly begun to adjust, finding a quiet rhythm in her new school, even making a few tentative friends who were drawn to her gentle nature and her quirky sense of humor. The serpent in their suburban Eden had arrived in the form of Ms. Henrietta Finch, elected HOA president on a platform of restoring community standards and enhancing property values. Ms. Finch, a woman whose rigidly coiffed silver hair and impeccably tailored, if somewhat severe business suits, seemed to reflect an inner landscape devoid of warmth or flexibility, quickly established herself as the self-appointed arbiter of all things Pleasant Valley. She possessed an almost pathological obsession with order conformity and the minutiae of HOA bylaws, which she wielded with the unyielding authority of a medieval inquisitor. And Maya, with her visible disability, her quiet nature, and her need for accommodations that deviated from Ms. Finch's narrow definition of normal, soon became the focus of her unwelcome attention. It began subtly with disapproving glances and passive-aggressive comments. Ms. Finch would find fault with the small ramp Alex had installed at their front door for Maya's occasional wheelchair use, muttering about unsightly modifications and impact on curb appeal. She complained that Maya's specially adapted tricycle, which allowed her to enjoy the neighborhood paths despite her painful knees, was too slow and impeded the progress of more vigorous residents. She made pointed remarks at HOA meetings about the importance of all residents contributing to the aesthetic harmony of the community, her gaze often lingering on Alex and Maya, making them feel like unwelcome outsiders, blemishes on the otherwise perfect facade of Pleasant Valley. The inciting incident, the first clear sign that Ms. Finch's disapproval was hardening into something more actively malicious, had occurred during the annual Pleasant Valley Spring Fling, a community fair that Ms. Finch orchestrated with military precision. Maya, despite her shyness and her physical limitations, had wanted to contribute. She had spent weeks painstakingly crafting small, beautiful beaded keychains, her swollen fingers working with slow, deliberate care. She had hoped to sell them at a small table, with the proceeds going to the local children's hospital, where she received her treatments. Alex had helped her set up a small, brightly decorated card table. Ms. Finch had descended upon them almost immediately, her face a mask of thinly veiled displeasure. "Mr. Tanner," she'd said, her voice carrying clearly to the nearby booths, "while I appreciate your daughter's attempt at entrepreneurship, I'm afraid this particular just craft does not meet the quality standards we expect for the spring fling. It's rather amateurish, don't you think? And frankly, it lowers the tone of the entire event." She had then gestured dismissively towards Maya's carefully arranged keychains. "Perhaps you should pack these up. We wouldn't want to give visitors the wrong impression of Pleasant Valley's commitment to excellence." Maya's lower lip had trembled, her eyes filling with tears of humiliation. Alex had felt a surge of protective fury, but he'd managed to keep his voice even though it was laced with an icy contempt. "Ms. Finch," he'd said, "my daughter has worked incredibly hard on these. They are made with love, and they are for a charitable cause. Your callous disregard for her efforts and for the spirit of this event is frankly appalling." Ms. Finch had merely sniffed, unrepentant. "Standards are standards, Mr. Tanner. Sentimentality has no place in maintaining the reputation of our community." She had then turned and swept away, leaving Maya heartbroken and Alex seething with a cold, contained rage. They had packed up Maya's keychains and gone home, the joyous atmosphere of the spring fling replaced by a heavy pall of disappointment and injustice. Ms. Finch had drawn her battle lines. Maya, and by extension Alex, were not welcome in her vision of a perfect Pleasant Valley. The rising action of Ms. Finch's campaign of harassment had been a relentless, soul-crushing offensive, a series of increasingly cruel and targeted attacks designed to break Maya's spirit and drive them from the neighborhood. She seemed to take a perverse pleasure in finding new ways to torment Maya, to highlight her differences, to make her feel like an unwelcome burden. She began to implement a bewildering array of new HOA rules, each one seemingly crafted with the specific intent of making Maya's life more difficult. All outdoor play equipment must be of a uniform color beige or forest green and must be stored out of sight when not in active use. Maya's brightly colored, specially adapted swing set, which brought her so much joy, was now a source of contention. No resident shall engage in repetitive or monotonous vocalizations in common areas. Maya sometimes hummed softly to herself as a self-soothing mechanism when she was feeling anxious or overwhelmed. All residents utilizing community pathways must maintain a brisk and continuous pace with no unscheduled stops or deviations from the designated route. Maya often needed to pause and rest her painful joints, and she loved to stop and examine flowers or interesting insects, small pleasures that Ms. Finch now sought to criminalize. Ms. Finch also embarked on a campaign of public shaming. She would coincidentally appear whenever Maya was struggling with a task, offering unsolicited advice in a loud, condescending tone, drawing the attention of other residents. "Oh dear, are we having trouble with that zipper again, Maya? Perhaps if you tried a little harder, focused a little more. Or, my, what a mess you're making with that ice cream cone. Such a shame when children don't learn proper table manners." Each comment was a small, poisoned dart designed to chip away at Maya's already fragile self-esteem. The first truly shocking escalation, the incident that made Alex realize the depths of Ms. Finch's malice, had involved Maya's assistance dog, a gentle, highly trained golden retriever named Gus, who helped Maya with mobility and provided invaluable emotional support. Gus was by law permitted in all public spaces. Ms. Finch, however, had launched a campaign to have Gus banned from Pleasant Valley's common areas, fabricating claims that he was unhygienic, that he posed a threat to other residents Gus wouldn't harm a fly, and that his presence violated HOA bylaws regarding nuisance animals. She had circulated a petition preying on the fears and prejudices of some of the more susceptible residents. Alex had been forced to hire a lawyer and threaten a federal lawsuit under the Americans with Disabilities Act to get Ms. Finch to back down. He had won, but the victory was Pyrrhic. The experience had left Maya terrified that Gus would be taken away from her, and it had further poisoned the atmosphere in the neighborhood, dividing residents and fueling Ms. Finch's resentment. The second shocking detail, the one that had directly precipitated the horror on the community green, had been even more personal, more insidious. Ms. Finch, in her capacity as HOA president, had access to resident information. She had somehow discovered the name and contact details of Maya's rheumatologist. She had then taken it upon herself to call the doctor's office, posing as a concerned neighbor and community leader, questioning Maya's diagnosis, suggesting that perhaps Maya was exaggerating her symptoms for attention, or that Alex was overly indulgent and not pursuing more aggressive or curative treatments. She'd even had the audacity to suggest that Maya might benefit from being placed in a specialized residential facility where her complex needs could be better managed. Dr. Anderson, Maya's compassionate and experienced rheumatologist, had immediately recognized Ms. Finch's call for what it was, a malicious, inappropriate, and potentially illegal attempt to interfere in Maya's medical care. She had curtly informed Ms. Finch that she was violating patient privacy laws and terminated the call, immediately notifying Alex of the incident. Alex had been shaken to his core. This was no longer just about HOA rules or neighborhood squabbles. Ms. Finch was actively trying to undermine his parental rights, to question Maya's medical reality, to pathologize his daughter. It was a terrifying escalation, a glimpse into the abyss of Ms. Finch's cruelty. He had consulted with his lawyer, who had advised him to document everything to build a case for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He had started keeping a detailed log, a grim catalog of Ms. Finch's escalating torments. And now this public, ritualistic humiliation, this forcing of his precious, vulnerable child to perform an act of such profound degradation. As Alex knelt on the grass, Maya's small, trembling hand gripping his like a lifeline, he saw not just an HOA bully, but a perpetrator who had with calculated cruelty targeted a disabled child, a perpetrator who was about to discover the full, unmitigated weight of the law. He gently disengaged Maya's hand, pressing a kiss to her tear-stained forehead. "Stay right here with me, sweetheart," he murmured, his voice thick with a love so fierce it was almost painful. "Daddy just needs to make a phone call. Then we're going home." He rose, his gaze locking with Ms. Finch's. Her initial bluster was fading, replaced by a dawning, uneasy flicker of apprehension in her cold, reptilian eyes. She had clearly expected him to yell, to argue, perhaps even to retreat in shame. She had not expected the preternatural calm, the icy professional detachment that now radiated from him. He pulled out his phone, his fingers surprisingly steady as he dialed the familiar number of his precinct. "This is Investigator Alex Tanner, Hate Crimes Unit, Oak Haven Police Department." He said, his voice clear, precise, carrying an authority that silenced the nervous whispers of the onlookers. "I am at the Pleasant Valley Estates Community Green. I have an active situation involving the aggravated harassment and felony abuse of a disabled minor with clear bias indicators. The perpetrator is on scene and contained. I require immediate uniformed backup and my supervising sergeant to respond. Code 3. He paused, his eyes still fixed on Ms. Finch's now ashen face, and advised dispatch that the victim is my daughter. The midpoint twist was not a subtle plot device. It was a detonation, a public unmasking that shattered Henrietta Finch's carefully constructed world of petty tyranny. She had terrorized a child, believing herself untouchable, shielded by her HOA presidency and the perceived powerlessness of her victims. She had no idea that the quiet, unassuming father of that child was a seasoned law enforcement professional, a specialist in the very type of hate-fueled abuse she had just perpetrated. She had no idea that she had just handed him on a silver platter all the evidence he needed to bring her meticulously crafted facade of respectability crashing down around her. The hunter, with chilling efficiency, had just become the prey. As Alex disconnected the call, he saw the first genuine tendrils of panic tighten around Ms. Finch's features. Her mouth opened, then closed, a small, fish-like gasp escaping her lips. She looked around, perhaps seeking support from the other residents, but their faces reflected only a mixture of shock, dawning horror, and a conspicuous desire to distance themselves from her. She was alone, exposed to her authority stripped away by a few calm, professional words. The wail of approaching sirens, a sound Alex usually associated with the grim necessities of his job, now carried a different resonance, the promise of protection for Maya, the imminent arrival of accountability for Ms. Finch. He knelt again beside his daughter, gently wiping her tear-streaked face with his handkerchief. "It's going to be okay, Maya, love," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion he fought to control. "It's going to be okay now. No one will ever hurt you like this again. I promise." He knew with a chilling certainty that this was just the beginning of a long and arduous road. The trauma inflicted on Maya today would not be easily erased, but as he held her close, feeling the fragile bird of her heart still fluttering wildly against his, a cold, hard resolve settled in his own. He would move heaven and earth. He would use every ounce of his skill, his knowledge, his authority. Henrietta Finch would pay for what she had done. He would make sure of it. The father would comfort and heal. The investigator would bring the monster to justice. The arrival of the first Oakhaven PD patrol car lights flashing cut through the tense atmosphere of the park like a surgeon's scalpel. Officers Ramirez and Cole Young, but competent, exited the vehicle, their expressions immediately serious as they took in the scene, Alex kneeling protectively beside a clearly distraught Maya, the small offensive candy wrapper still lying on the grass, and Ms. Finch now wringing her hands, her face a mask of burgeoning panic. Investigator Tanner Officer Ramirez addressed Alex with professional courtesy, though his eyes were filled with a concerned inquiry. Dispatch reported a Code 3 involving a juvenile victim. That's correct. Officer Ramirez Alex confirmed, his voice steady, though the effort was immense. He gave them a concise, factual summary of the incident, his words precise, devoid of overt emotion, yet painting a devastating picture of Ms. Finch's actions. The perpetrator is Ms. Henrietta Finch, HOA president for this community. She coerced my 10-year-old daughter, Maya, who has a significant physical disability affecting her hands, to attempt to retrieve that piece of litter with her mouth as a form of public humiliation and punishment. He saw a flicker of shock, then disgust, cross both officers' faces. This was beyond any neighborhood dispute. This was something dark and ugly. While Officer Cole began to calmly secure the area, creating a perimeter and identifying potential witnesses among the lingering onlookers, many of whom now seemed eager to provide their accounts, their earlier reticence replaced by a palpable sense of outrage, Officer Ramirez knelt beside Maya, his voice gentle. "Hi, Maya. I'm Officer Ramirez. You're very brave. Is there anything I can get for you right now?" "Some water, maybe?" Maya, still largely non-responsive, merely burrowed deeper into Alex's embrace, but Alex appreciated the officer's attempt at a trauma-informed approach. Detective Sergeant Sarah Washington, Alex's direct supervisor and a veteran of countless grim investigations in the hate crimes unit, arrived minutes later. Sarah was a force of nature, a woman whose imposing physical presence was matched by an equally formidable intellect and a fierce, unwavering commitment to justice for victims of bias. She took one look at Maya's tear-streaked face, at Alex's grimly controlled expression, at the now openly weeping Ms. Finch being kept at a distance by Officer Cole, and her own face hardened into a mask of cold fury. "Alex," she said, her voice low and tight, an undercurrent of protective anger thrumming beneath the surface. "Tell me everything, and don't leave out a single damn detail." Alex recounted the events again, this time, including the painful history of Ms. Finch's escalating harassment, the pattern of ableist remarks, the deliberate acts of exclusion, the insidious attempts to undermine Maya's well-being and his own parental authority. He laid it all out, a litany of petty cruelties and calculated abuses that had culminated in this monstrous act of public degradation. Sarah listened without interruption, her eyes like chips of obsidian, never leaving Ms. Finch. The air around them seemed to crackle with a contained righteous anger. "All right," Sarah said, when Alex had finished, her voice dangerously quiet. "This isn't just child abuse, Alex, though. God knows it's that in spades. This is a hate crime. Clear as day. The targeting, the specific nature of the humiliation related to her disability, the history of bias. Finch has cooked her own goose." She turned to Officers Ramirez and Cole. "Secure all witness statements. Photograph the scene, including the position of the victim, the perpetrator, and that piece of trash. Bag the wrapper as evidence. I want a full canvas of the area for any prior incidents involving Ms. Finch and this family." "Alex," she turned back to him, "you're the primary victim's guardian here and a witness. I know your instincts, but I need you to let us handle the formal processing of Finch. You focus on Maya. We've got this." The climax of Henrietta Finch's reign of terror, her public unmasking and arrest, was executed with a chilling professional efficiency that left no room for her customary bluster or manipulation. Detective Washington, flanked by the uniformed officers, approached Ms. Finch, who had collapsed onto a park bench, her earlier defiance replaced by a theatrical display of weeping and protestations of innocence. Henrietta Finch. Detective Washington's voice cut through Finch's histrionics like a scalpel. You are under arrest for violation of California Penal Code, Section 422. 6. Commission of a hate crime by interfering with civil rights through force or threat of force. Penal Code Section 273A, B. Felony child abuse, likely to produce great bodily harm or death, in this instance, severe emotional trauma. And Penal Code Section 368, B1. Felony, elder or dependent adult abuse, as Maya's disability renders her a dependent adult in certain contexts of care and vulnerability. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Ms. Finch let out a piercing shriek. No, this is a mistake. A misunderstanding. I was merely trying to teach the child responsibility. She's clumsy. She's always making messes. It's for her own good. He's twisting everything. She gestured wildly towards Alex, her face contorted with a mixture of fear and venom. He's a policeman. He's using his power to destroy me. This is a personal vendetta. Ma'am, Officer Ramirez interjected, his voice firm but calm. Investigator Tanner has recused himself from any official role in your arrest or the subsequent investigation due to his relationship with the victim. This is being handled by Detective Sergeant Washington of the Hate Crimes Unit. Your allegations of a vendetta are baseless. Now, please stand up and place your hands behind your back. The sight of the once imperious Ms. Finch, her face streaked with tears and makeup, her expensive linen suit now rumpled and stained with grass, being handcuffed and led towards a waiting patrol car, sent a visible shockwave through the assembled crowd of Pleasant Valley residents. The whispers were louder now, a mixture of disbelief, horror, and for some, a grim, undeniable satisfaction. The queen of their meticulously ordered kingdom had been dethroned, her reign of petty cruelty and ableist prejudice brought to a stunning public end. As she was placed in the back of the police car, Ms. Finch caught Alex's eye. Her face, for a fleeting moment, was no longer a mask of theatrical woe, but a chilling canvas of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was a look Alex had seen many times before in the eyes of perpetrators who had been stripped of their power, their bigotry laid bare for the world to see. It was the look of a monster, finally unmasked. The falling action was a long and winding path, a journey through the complex, often frustrating machinery of the criminal justice system and the equally challenging, deeply personal process of Maya's healing. Ms. Finch, despite the efforts of a high-priced defense attorney who attempted to paint her as a misunderstood victim of a vindictive, overzealous police officer and a hypersensitive child, was denied bail. The nature of her crime, the clear evidence of bias, and her demonstrated lack of remorse made her a continuing threat to the community, particularly to Maya. Alex, with the unwavering support of Detective Washington and the entire Hate Crimes Unit, dedicated himself to ensuring that Ms. Finch was held fully accountable. He provided meticulous documentation of her prior acts of harassment, his detailed log becoming a crucial piece of evidence in establishing a pattern of bias-motivated behavior. He worked closely with the deputy district attorney assigned to the case, a passionate advocate for victims' rights named Maria Sanchez, helping her to understand the nuances of Maya's disability and the profound psychological impact of Ms. Finch's abuse. The Pleasant Valley. Homeowners Association, reeling from the scandal and facing a barrage of negative media attention, HOA president charged with hate crime and disabled child's abuse case descended into chaos. An emergency board meeting was convened at which Ms. Finch was summarily impeached and permanently removed from her position. The remaining board members, many of whom had been either intimidated by Finch or passively complicit in her behavior, issued a series of groveling public apologies to Alex and Maya. They pledged to undertake a complete overhaul of the HOA's bylaws, to implement mandatory diversity, inclusion, and disability sensitivity training for all board members and staff, and to work towards creating a genuinely welcoming and supportive environment for all residents. The task of dismantling Ms. Finch's toxic legacy would be long and difficult, but the first steps towards reform had been taken. The community of Pleasant Valley was forced into a painful but necessary period of soul-searching. Many residents expressed deep shame and regret for their silence, for their failure to challenge Ms. Finch's escalating tyranny. The incident became a catalyst for difficult conversations about ableism, prejudice, and the responsibility of bystanders to intervene in the face of injustice. A grassroots movement led by a group of concerned parents and residents emerged dedicated to promoting inclusivity and celebrating diversity within Pleasant Valley. They organized community workshops, invited speakers on disability rights, and created a buddy system to support families with special needs. Maya's journey of healing was the most challenging of all. The public humiliation, the terror of that afternoon on the green, had left deep, invisible wounds. She suffered from nightmares, flashbacks, and an acute exacerbation of her anxiety. Her selective mutism, which had been slowly improving, returned with a vengeance, her voice often trapped behind a wall of fear. She became withdrawn, reluctant to leave the safety of their home, her trust in the outside world shattered. Alex's heart ached with every small sign of her distress, but he surrounded her with a fierce, unwavering love, a constant reassurance of her worth, her safety, her belovedness. He found a new therapist for Maya, Dr. Emily Carter, no relation, a renowned child psychologist who specialized in trauma and working with children with chronic illnesses and disabilities. Dr. Carter's approach was gentle, patient, and creative, utilizing art therapy, play therapy, and animal-assisted therapy with a specially trained therapy dog named Biscuit to help Maya process her experiences and find her voice again. Alex attended every session with Maya, learning alongside her, becoming her most steadfast partner in healing. Slowly, painstakingly, Maya began to reclaim herself. The nightmares became less frequent. The silences grew shorter. She started to draw again her pictures, at first filled with dark, swirling colors and fractured images, then gradually, tentatively, incorporating small glimmers of light of hope. She formed a deep bond with Biscuit, the therapy dog, whose unconditional affection and calming presence seemed to work a quiet magic. The legal proceedings against Henrietta Finch dragged on for nearly 18 months. Her defense attorney employed every tactic in the book. Motions to dismiss attempts to discredit Alex and other witnesses' arguments that Ms. Finch suffered from a temporary lapse in judgment due to stress. But the evidence against her, particularly the eyewitness accounts, the video footage from a neighbor's security camera that had inadvertently captured part of the incident, and Dr. Carter's expert testimony on the profound psychological trauma inflicted on Maya was overwhelming. The resolution came not with a dramatic courtroom trial, but with a plea agreement negotiated on the eve of the trial. Faced with the near certainty of a conviction on all felony counts, including the hate crime enhancement, which would significantly increase her sentence, Ms. Finch reluctantly pleaded guilty to 1 count of felony child abuse with a hate crime finding and 1 count of misdemeanor harassment. The DA, Maria Sanchez, after extensive consultation with Alex and Dr. Carter, agreed to the plea, believing it would spare Maya the additional trauma of testifying and would still result in a significant sentence that reflected the gravity of Ms. Finch's crimes. At the sentencing hearing, Alex read a victim impact statement, his voice thick with emotion, but unwavering in its resolve. He spoke not just of Maya's pain, her fear, her stolen innocence, but also of the broader societal implications of Ms. Finch's actions, the insidious nature of ableist prejudice, the devastating impact of hate-fueled abuse on vulnerable individuals and communities. He spoke of Maya's courage, her resilience, her quiet strength. The judge, a stern, experienced jurist named Esther Goldstein, listened intently, her expression grim. Before pronouncing sentence, she addressed Ms. Finch directly. Ms. Finch, Judge Goldstein, said, her voice ringing with a cold, righteous anger, "What you did to that innocent child was not just a crime. It was an act of profound moral depravity. You abused your position of authority. You targeted a vulnerable, disabled girl. You sought to humiliate, to degrade, to break her spirit, simply because she was different, because she did not conform to your narrow, prejudiced view of the world. Your actions were, in a word, despicable. They were, in the eyes of the law, a hate crime, and for that you will be held accountable." Henrietta Finch was sentenced to 5 years in state prison, the maximum allowed under the plea agreement for the felony count, with an additional year for the misdemeanor to be served concurrently. She was ordered to undergo intensive anti-bias and anger management counseling upon her release. A permanent restraining order was issued prohibiting her from ever coming within 1,000 yards of Maya or Alex, or from residing in Pleasant Valley. She was also ordered to pay substantial financial restitution to cover the ongoing costs of Maya's therapy and other related expenses. Her assets, including her meticulously maintained house in Pleasant Valley, were seized and sold to satisfy the judgment. Her life, as she had known it, was over. Her reputation irrevocably destroyed, her name, a permanent stain on the community she had once sought to dominate. It was not a moment of triumph for Alex, merely one of grim, somber satisfaction. Justice had been served as much as the imperfect human system of justice allowed, but the real victory, he knew, would be in Maya's continued healing, in her ability to reclaim the joy and peace that Ms. Finch had so cruelly tried to extinguish. In the years that followed, Maya, with the unwavering love of her father, the skilled guidance of Dr. Carter, the steadfast companionship of Biscuit, and the unexpected transformative support of her community, blossomed. The scars of her trauma remained as such scars always do, but they no longer defined her. She found her voice again, not just literally, but metaphorically. She became an articulate, passionate advocate for herself and for other children with disabilities, sharing her story with Alex's and Dr. Carter's careful guidance at school assemblies and community events, her quiet courage inspiring everyone she met. She discovered a talent for writing her stories and poems filled with a wisdom and empathy that belied her years. She even tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, returned to the community green, the scene of her deepest humiliation, now reclaimed as a place of play, of friendship, of belonging. Pleasant Valley Estates was no longer the same. The reign of Ms. Finch had paradoxically been the catalyst for a profound and lasting transformation. The community, awakened from its complacent slumber, had embraced the challenge of becoming a truly inclusive, compassionate, and supportive place for all its residents. The HOA, under new enlightened leadership, became a model for other communities, actively promoting diversity, accessibility, and a culture of mutual respect. One crisp autumn afternoon, several years after Ms. Finch's sentencing, Alex sat on a park bench, watching Maya, now a confident, articulate teenager, laughing as she threw a frisbee for Biscuit. Her movements were still sometimes stiff, her hands still bore the marks of her illness, but her smile was radiant, her eyes bright with an unquenchable spirit. She was surrounded by a group of friends, a diverse, joyful mix of children of all abilities, their easy camaraderie, a testament to the changes that had swept through Pleasant Valley. A young mother, new to the neighborhood, sat down beside Alex. "Your daughter," she said, nodding towards Maya. "She's something special, isn't she? So confident, so kind." Alex smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with a pride so profound it was almost an ache. "Yes, she is." He knew the fight against hate, against prejudice, against the kind of casual cruelty that Ms. Finch had embodied was a marathon, not a sprint. It required constant vigilance, unwavering courage, and a fierce, unyielding commitment to justice. But as he watched Maya, his resilient, extraordinary daughter, soaring like a bright, indomitable bird against the clear autumn sky, he felt a sense of hope, a profound and abiding belief in the power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring capacity for even the most fractured communities to heal, to learn, and to grow towards the light. The candy wrapper was long gone, its poison neutralized, replaced by the sweet, life-affirming fragrance of acceptance, courage, and a hard-won, deeply cherished peace.